This is so awesome. Everything about it, the tribute has been so magnificent. Pete, for those of us who really knew him, had a healthy ego. It was very positive. He was so confident in his abilities, and that's why he accomplished all he did. So when I look out and I see these incredible honored guests, these are giants. We have top politicians, religious leaders, sports heroes, captains of industry, and yet Pete easily soared with them on eagle's wings. Okay, he loved this pomp and circumstance. He really did. And it's what he truly loved about the church. He loved the structure of school and the discipline that came around with it. He loved the framework and the rules of any contest that he played because he got to play the game afterwards. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to grieve for just a very brief period longer, and then we're going to celebrate his life forever. So first and foremost is how Pete would start every speech. I watched him sit next to me when he delivered some of the best things that we never recorded, unfortunately, but he would write in his phone 6 lines or 6 words and then just deliver off the top of his head some amazing thing. So if you're out there and you are thinking this might be the luckiest man speech, it's not. I think Father Tony said it best when he said, all the words and all the tributes left to pros like Dan and Steve have been out there. So I'm going to call this the most blessed family speech. So, first and foremost, we want to thank the entire St. John's Prep community, BC community, and the cities of Boston and Beverly, and the state of Massachusetts, because if it wasn't for this foundation and this structure and support, none of this would have happened. A special thank you to Pat Quinn, because Pat, if he hadn't been mentored by Pete and then tagged Pete when he saw the perfect vehicle, the Ice Bucket Challenge, come around, none of this would be happening. Pro teams got involved, but Pete was never a pro athlete, and Mike Gambino and I often talked about, what if we could get the NCAA to do something of recognition? And all 4 major sports teams and beyond have done so much. But I want to give a special shout out to the Red Sox, because if it wasn't for their undying support and coming out to give that ring a couple months ago to Pete, really completed his baseball career, and he knew it. I want to also thank my St. John's Prep classmates and my BC 80 classmates. Katie Sullivan, a friend of ours from Holy Cross, always called this phenomenon a fop. And she always wanted to be a fop. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute, he's only 9 years old. Well, a fop is a friend of Pete. And then so you're all fops. So he took it and then made it Team Freight Train. Nancy and Jen were really concerned that I wouldn't have my remembrances and my memories together. But what happened, unfortunately, is while I was caring for him many times alone in my thoughts, I really couldn't communicate with him as well any longer. I always imagined I would be doing something like this, but not at this magnificent setting. We knew early on that Pete was a gift to be shared. Back then we were new parents, Nancy and I, and there would be what they called appointment play dates. So somebody would call and schedule an appointment with Pete, and then he would go over to that child's house and he would play exclusively. I never understood it because my mother told me to get out, and when the streetlights come on, come on back home. Well, one day the kids came to the door and they asked where Pete was. Oh, he's down at so-and-so's house. Go get him. Well, that night we got a phone call from the mother who was so distraught, complaining that her exclusivity with Pete was ruined. And right then and there, we put an end to the scheduled play dates, because we knew Pete was a gift that had to be shared with the world, and that he was. Jennifer, our oldest, has always been strong-willed, hyper-focused, and goal-oriented. She was so strongly independent that she kind of kept us away from her life, or at arm's length, at least. I think she actually posed for the Flutie statue that's just down here, over here, called the Heisman. But once she was married, Dan and Jen came rushing back to our life. In fact, she was working in New York City, and within hours of Pete being diagnosed, she managed to be there and has never left our side. So she has been our rock. Andrew, he was as gifted an athlete as Pete, and he idolized his older brother. In fact, Andrew was being mentored by Pete so much that he was really his second father, and I just relaxed. I didn't have to do much. What is frightening now for both of us is he just announced to me this week that he's in charge of my life. So we'll see how that goes. Julie and Lucy, they are truly Pete's loves. Julie, you made him so completely happy. You loved each other unconditionally under the most difficult of circumstances. Julie, you gave him the gift, the miracle of Lucy, but you also completed him by giving him that white picket fence that he so often talked about that could possibly be snatched away from him. I can attest that one's life flashes before you during the passing, because Pete's life has been flashing before my eyes. I could have stopped this movie at any point in time, from his childhood, through his high school, through his college and beyond, and picked a poignant, impactful story. But last week I thought it was perfect because we had a major snowstorm. Isn't that right, Governor? And of course, not being disciplined enough, not being prepared, I didn't have the plow on my truck in time. So Pete, Andrew, and I would do a couple of our small two-families. We would do the neighbors and relatives. I'm waiting for a thank you, but... And there were probably a dozen homes that we would do only in the confines of Beverly, and it would take max, under the worst storm, 2 hours. So plow wrestling is what I do best. I get out there and I'm taunted by the sign on the side of the plow that says minute mount, and I go too far to the left, too far to the right. Finally, I smash into it and it knocks off the stand. I've got to get a chain and a hoist and put it on. 30 minutes later, I'm back inside all frustrated. Well, last week, it was time for Pete to get up, and Ian, the nurse, and I were putting him up, and I said, Pete, bud, I could really have used you on that one. And I got this huge smile. So he knew that, his dad was just screwing around out there. Because he did everything better than anything I could do. But Andrew and I plow that route exactly the same way. And probably the majority of all of you would do it, which is to take on a task, go out there and do it efficiently and effectively, and come back and finish. Oh no, not Pete. So there was a big storm that happened, and I was so happy that he was home from school on a break, and he says, Dad, I got this. Okay, great. So the truck we had at that time was literally a monster vehicle. It had a big V10 motor, it had 2 huge gas tanks, and it only got 9 miles to the gallon. But that's okay, we're not going outside the city limits, and we do our 10 driveways and come home. So 4 hours into this thing, I call him up on the little flip phone. Hey, Pete, where are you? Dad, I'm in Peabody. Peabody? What are you doing in Peabody? Oh, I was out there and I'm talking to all my buddies, and one of the guys said, hey, my parents asked me to come by, but if you're out and about, why don't you do it? Sure. Okay, so he says, Dad, then I hit a poor guy wrestling at the end of his driveway because they packed him in, and he was so grateful. It was awesome. And then there was a guy stuck on the side of the road. I had the chain, I pulled him out. And I'm thinking to myself, who does this? So it was 6 hours that he was out there, and the only reason he came home was because he was out of fuel. So the $250 I put in that thing that should have lasted me the whole winter was gone. But he recalled exactly what he did, how he helped, And on the 6th hour, he said, there's a woman up the street. She just bought that small yellow house. Do you remember that? She and her adult daughter. Yeah, sure, Pete. Well, they were saying to me that they just moved here from California. They were ill-equipped for this storm. You are a godsend. And he did their steps, the drive, and then they told him about some dogs that they had out back. Julie, you'll like that one. And he cleaned out all the area for the dogs to romp. And I said, well, geez, did anybody ask you or offer you any money? No. Whoa, yeah, no, of course they did that. Yeah, but I didn't take it. What's the matter? He said it was the smile. It was the look of appreciation on their faces. So the currency that Pete worked in was just what we were talking about tonight. It was helping others. He was a perfect Jesuit in that way, which is their motto, men and women for others. That's Pete. Corey Griffin, Pete's BC hockey buddy, died, unfortunately, after raising the largest single donation for the Ice Bucket Challenge in 2014. Rob and Kathy Griffin have become such good friends of ours because we're sharing kind of the same path on this. But Rob and Kathy showed us so much strength and courage because within days of Corey's passing down in Nantucket, they were there at the largest Ice Bucket Challenge that was filmed on live TV at Granite Telecommunications. It was a remarkable act of love and support and strength. So Rob, who used to be in Nancy's, we're all in the same class, BC 1980, but Rob and Nancy were in the School of Management, so they were, wicked smart. But we've become good friends, Rob and I. And what Rob tells me about his experience is he's speaking to Corey all the time. He hears from Corey daily. I didn't understand until Pete's journey was complete what that meant, because all of this, all the minutia that went into planning what he's wearing right now, it all came from him. He chose the photo, the pictures, the scriptures. He was the one who said, I want this suit, that tie, and I put on his cleats. So that was my contribution. All right, he's imploring me right now to stop my Johnsons, as he would call it, and land this plane. So I'm going to ask you for three things. One is stay with the family, stay with our mission to strike out ALS. It's so vitally important to us. We talked about the miracle of Lucy being born in the throes of ALS. We talked about the miracle of the largest viral sensation in the history of mankind that could have been, thank God, Pat Quinn tagged Pete, but Pete had this FOP, this Team Freight Train, this incredible network that he talks about all the time, so it truly was a miracle. So I'm wondering, what uniform should he wear when he's up for beatification? Because he has to have this uniform. He had a snowplow uniform, a landscape uniform, his baseball uniform, his football uniform. Second thing I want to ask is that you love and support unconditionally Julie and Lucy. The old man down here, 94-year-old Captain Jack, is 4 generations ahead of Lucy. So I can only imagine, Dad, that the next 100 years, Lucy's going to be around. And probably so will you. So I'm hoping I'm not being too religious, because he would always end with this affirmation that Nancy found in his school paperwork downstairs. So if you turn on the back of the program, maybe we can all cite this together. Be passionate, be genuine, be hardworking, and don't ever be afraid to be great. That's Pete right there. Okay, and I forgot the third one. So he's the ultimate servant leader, as we talked. But There's no crying in baseball, right? And the words he said to us that night he was diagnosed is, there's no wallowing in ALS. So when we walk out of this beautiful, magnificent church after the ceremony's over, we're done with grieving. We're done. All we're doing is celebrating Pete Frates for the magnificent human he was. Thank you.
John? Good job. Good job.